question we have is, does UC Berkeley and UCLA require letters of recommendation? The short answer to that is no. None of the UCs do have any provision for any recommendation letters. So there's no teacher recs, no counselor rec, and no outside recommendation letters as well. Of course, you probably also know that the UCs do not accept any test scores. So the range of things that the UCs look at are a little bit more limited than, let's say, private universities. They're mostly going to be looking at, of course, your grades, your activities, and your essays. And they really wanted to put a lot more emphasis on those factors, right? Next question is the class academic tutor, I guess that's probably the same as TA, is not an honors or AP level. It will lower the weighted GPA. It could help the letter of recommendation from the teacher that I tutor for. Is it worth it to take in 12th grade? One thing to be clear of is that colleges do not look at a weighted GPA in a vacuum. What that means by that is that don't be afraid of taking non-weighted classes if you think that it's something that you really want to do. Just because like colleges are not just going to look at whoever has the highest pure weighted GPA. They're going to look at the entirety of your transcript. They're going to see which classes you take. They're largely judging you based on the decisions you make in terms of like how you did in challenging courses. Did you challenge yourself by taking all these difficult classes? So if you have one class out of your 6, maybe 7 or 8, however many number you have, that's a non-weighted class because you wanted to TA for someone. The same would be true too if you had like a leadership class. I know people in student government sometimes have to take leadership class, or like if you're in band or orchestra, those students are not penalized because they're not in a weighted class, right? That's very important to remember that. So now having said that, if you start stacking your senior year with a lot of easier classes, I wouldn't recommend having a free period and a TA period or something like that. Right. So as long as the rest of your schedule looks rigorous and you're taking difficult, challenging classes, even senior year, then that's not going to be an issue. Of course, if you want to do that to be able to get a stronger recommendation letter from a teacher, that's probably a strategic good choice, right? As long as hopefully you have another 3 or 4, possibly 5 weighted classes in addition to that, I think your schedule is going to look more than strong enough. Now, if you weren't sure about it, one option, if let's say, for example, you wanted to be a tutor and because of that, you don't have as much work, you can also consider taking an outside college level class like the ones that we talked about from UC Riverside, or you could take them at a local college. That could also add rigor to your schedule if you were worried about like your schedule looking softer because you wanted a TA. Okay. Next question is, my son is interested in marketing, public relations, and law, but his math is okay, not strong. What kind of major in the business field is for a BA student and good for a career? Keep in mind that most undergraduate business majors don't really allow for a lot of specialization. I mean, it's very rare, unless there's a specific like college of business, that there are even other types of business majors, right? So many colleges will simply have an undergraduate business major. Maybe you can have a concentration or specialization. So you probably just major in undergrad business. Some schools don't even have undergrad business, so you might have to major in economics. That's probably a good choice too. Econ is a little bit more math dependent, but you don't need to be like, someone who's taking multivariable calculus in high school to be able to take econ. I think, some rudimentary math skills and problem solving would probably be adequate. If you take in stats, I think that would probably help as well. Now, having said that, if they're not really into the more quantitative aspects of business, you're right. Things like marketing and advertising would definitely be good. Management in general is probably a good choice because it's pretty versatile. And it also gives you options. Like there's not really any sort of like requisite major for like law later on. So if you wanted to go for any really type of undergraduate business specialization, even if you're not the strongest in math, you should still be fine. Right? They're not that math dependent where you need to be like an elite math student to be able to do well in most business concentrations, to be honest. Okay, next. If a student got a C in AP chemistry in sophomore year, does that mean that most UCs won't accept my application regardless of any major, including CS or history? Well, okay, so a C doesn't look great, I'll be honest, but the fact that it was sophomore year, if you can follow that up with a really strong junior year and get A's, you should still be in the mix for most of the UCs. Now, I'll be honest with a C though, it's probably going to make Berkeley and UCLA very, very difficult. I wouldn't say impossible. We've had success stories of students who still managed to get into a Berkeley Berkeley even with a C, and maybe like a couple of Bs. But it's much more rare these days, right? So just keep in mind that the UCs operate on they have something called the 13 factors, and your grades are maybe 2 or 3 of those factors, but there are other factors within the criteria that they use that could outweigh, especially if you have like amazing activities, if you have leadership, that could maybe allow you a fighting chance if they feel like you have a really strong profile, regardless of that one C, especially if there's circumstances that explain the C and the rest of your grades are phenomenal, right? So, I mean, it's never completely something you could rule out, but, obviously just really finish that strong junior year. And then if you can take a couple of college classes for the next couple of summers, I think that would be a wonderful way to sort of offset that, because the UCs will actually accept college coursework, even up to and including the summer after 11th grade. They won't accept anything from 12th grade onward in the fall when you start, but any college level courses you take can still count as part of your UC GPA. Okay. Next, junior student studying biochemistry. How do you do research internships this summer? How to contact college professors? Okay, so if you're a current or, well, about to be a rising senior, so typically for research internships, I mean, the window has probably closed for a lot of the most competitive summer programs, I'll be frank, just because most of the competitive programs, they have their deadlines sometime around like January to March. However, what you could do is you could directly contact some college professors yourself, have a resume of your coursework and your skills and activities. And if they're suitably impressed by you, they could probably offer you potentially a chance to intern for them, right? Now, at this stage, I probably wouldn't necessarily go for like the most competitive colleges in your surrounding area. Like if you live in Northern California, for instance, probably not the best strategy to hit up only Berkeley or Stanford professors, because they probably already have their plan set. But if you check some of the smaller colleges in the area, you could probably find a professor that would be willing to work with you for a research internship. HS2 does also have a couple of research internships through schools like George Mason University. So even if it's not directly relevant to, let's say, biochemistry, that definitely, we do have some options available to help students, become more competitive and hopefully get a research-based internship this summer. Right. Next is, we are California residents. If we move out of California once our kids get into the UCs, are they still considered as an in-state student with lower tuition? That's definitely something you're going to have to run through the UCs, not for the duration of, I think, when they're there. Because, technically, they would still be under the parents' financial stuff for like things like financial aid. So I think as long as you still retain California residency, it's probably like for most states, if you move out, it's going to be a year. So maybe by their sophomore year, you would then count as an out of state. So that's definitely something, though, that you would want to talk to a financial aid officer once you're already in a UC, because they'll be able to tell you the procedures for that. Okay, next is, can you recommend some prestigious and highly selective business summer schools or camps? A couple of prominent ones that many people apply to are the Wharton School of Business for UPenn does have like some really competitive camps. There's a program called Launch X that used to be run at MIT, but has now since moved to different campuses. That is very prestigious. I would say Babson College is one of the most known for entrepreneurship. That would be one to look at. And there are a couple in California too. The one at UC Berkeley, there's a program called B-Bay that's really solid. The USC pre-college business program is also strong because Marshall is a top 10 school for business. Okay. Next is, if a student has very good GPA, but also has ASD, should they avoid talking about ASD? In their application essay. That's a little tricky. It depends largely on whether or not the student has largely still succeeded despite any conditions, right? So that's definitely something that's on a case-by-case basis, but I would say it's not necessarily like many college admissions people do have a very high like sensitivity and awareness to things like mental health issues, so that oftentimes many of these schools now offer accommodations. It's not like maybe like 10, 20 years ago, where it's a little bit tricky to be able to kind of like talk to talk to colleges about that because they might be worried about the student. But as long as you can basically tell them how the experience of going through certain like conditions have helped you become like a stronger student, have grown from it, then I think that could still add value to your application for sure. Okay. All right. This might be our last question for the evening. So the big sister of my daughter's friend is an 11th grader and has already received scholarship from both U of Chicago and Northwestern University. I don't know the family well enough to ask for details, but I'd like to know how to help my daughter achieve a similar result. Also, I thought the application forms don't get sent out until the student is in 12th grade. I don't know the context for that. It wouldn't be official in that case. It might be that they're being recruited for something and there are potential offers from those schools. I know the Ivies are not allowed to offer scholarships, but there might be something about possible recruitment. It can't be official unless they applied early for some reason. So if they haven't applied yet, then no, I'm not sure about the details of that, but that doesn't sound, I don't know. I'm not sure about the specifics of that to be sure. Okay. Next, few people talked about the Cal State, CSU. Well, they talked about community college transfers or UC or rankings after top 75 schools. What are your opinions? There's some really amazing Cal States. The Cal Poly schools, both the one in San Luis Obispo and the one in, Cal Poly in Pomona are really solid schools. I would say, depending on what you want to study, there would still be excellent choices for things like computer science and engineering and business. San Jose State is outstanding. So yeah, I mean, those are incredibly good values. They're also significantly cheaper than the UCs, right? So that's definitely is something that we encourage a lot of our students to apply to Cal State campuses for sure, right? So depending on how, what your college list looks like, for some students, they would make great backup schools. For some students, they are actually good fit schools based on their profile. So it just depends on your situation, depends on your grades and how strong your profile is. But yes, I would say that Cal States are severely underrated for a lot of different fields, right? So many of the Cal States are actually really outstanding depending on which major you're going for potentially. So yeah, so they would actually make a lot of sense because if you're going the community college route, there's no guarantees, right? So you could plan to transfer in 2 years, but what if your grades start slipping up, right? Or what if you don't have all the adequate courses you need in order to be able to graduate in time? So oftentimes, if you do go into a good Cal State school, I think that's going to be something that, you could consider that as an option. I mean, tell you what, a couple of my classmates at Harvard for my master's program were actually Cal State graduates, right? So it doesn't necessarily mean that just because like went to a UC that you would automatically have the leg up in terms of grad school applications. If you make the best out of your education, depending on where you end up for your undergrad, you could still be very competitive for a lot of top programs, right? So it's not like your academic career is somehow predestined if you go to a Cal State as opposed to a UC. So they're very outstanding, options there for, depending on what major you're going for, especially. Okay. All right, I guess that's pretty much it for tonight. Since we did have a lot of questions regarding the UCs, I'd like to invite you to join me in a couple of weeks. So 2 weeks from now, I will be hosting a seminar specifically on the UC application process. So do please join us for that. Love to give you more information to be able to answer some of these questions so that you have a more nuanced understanding of how the UC application process works. Okay. All right, so I guess that's it for me tonight. Thank you so much for joining us and have a great weekend.